Welcome to Lost Girl Therapy. This is part 2 of all the practices that I've tried. Go back and watch part 1 if you want to see the things that I started with before I got diagnosed with POTS. So we left off on Reiki. I would not recommend it. Then I moved on to my second round of physical therapy, which I started doing after I got my POTS diagnosis. At this point, I had already had migraines for 2 years. I had gone through 1 round of PT. I had tried Rolfing. I had tried every migraine medication under the sun, and nothing was working. When I got my POTS diagnosis, the only reason I got it was because a doctor at NYU took a chance on me, and he said, "I think that you have this." He put me on a tilt table, and lo and behold, there it was. I went to physical therapy because that was the only way that I knew how to build strength. I didn't trust myself to get on a treadmill. I didn't trust myself to go back to yoga. I had tried to do yoga practices. I had tried to go back to Pilates, and I was having a lot of adverse reactions, including heightened heart rate, adrenaline shakes, feeling really faint, honestly being out of breath. I was out of breath at this point, like walking down the block. So I just felt like a controlled environment with a practitioner that I trusted was really important. This time when I went back to physical therapy, I got really lucky and I found somebody who specialized in dysautonomia. That was critical. You do not just go to any physical therapist. You need someone who understands what dysautonomia is. At this point, I did not have a jugular vein compression diagnosis yet. So all I did was the full dysautonomia protocol of physical therapy, which meant I did all of my exercises sitting down. I also took extended breaks between all of my exercises, which my physical therapist made me take. I actually didn't want to do them, but it was the best thing that I ever did. The reason being is that I had yet to gain an awareness of what it meant to give your body time to recover from stimulation. I still was like, it's fine, I will just rebuild my strength. That is not what we do with POTS. You need times of flare and you need times of recovery in order to rebuild your endurance. When I did this, the biggest difference between my first round of physical therapy and my second round was that, yes, I was seated during everything, but we focused on strength training as opposed to agility. So in my first round of physical therapy, I did a lot of isometric holds. I integrated a lot of yoga moves. This time around, all I did was strength training. Everything was in a seat and I avoided my neck like the plague. My neck had begun hurting. I noticed that I was having kind of like a bobblehead syndrome. I had difficulty with singing. I really couldn't sustain a lot of activity that involved me like looking down. And so all we did was like shoulder exercises and some minor lower body that was done with me laying down. I did have to take time to like sit up off the table. I was not jumping up out of things. I also really limited my positions. So I would do a bunch of positions seated in one location. And then about halfway through, we'd move across the room to like a table and do all of the positions there. And that was really intentional because the act of like moving across a room at this time was really challenging for me and it took a lot of energy out. And this is why I say you need a practitioner who knows what they're doing when it comes to dysautonomia. The next thing that I was doing was I was taking voice lessons. If I had to do it over again, I would take voice lessons now, not at that time, because I did not have the respiratory strength to get through a lesson. I would also later learn that the triggering of the vagus nerve when you have an overstimulated nervous system does not feel nice and good. It feels like a fear response and it can trigger anxiety attacks. There were numerous occasions in voice lessons, despite the fact that I have been a singer for the entirety of my life, where I became lightheaded, started shaking, needed to lay down, thought I was going to faint, felt nauseous, like had a panic attack. And God bless my voice teacher because this girl rolled with the punches like no one else, but I would never say go back and do it at that time in that heightened state of sensation. The third thing that I did during this second round of stuff after the POTS diagnosis was I discovered the Levine protocol because of a content creator online. I have a whole separate video on the Levine protocol and I would say 10 out of 10 would do it over again. The reason being is that it was so important in teaching me how to rebuild strength, rebuilding my confidence to get back into the machines at the gym, and also helped train me from a respiratory perspective to not feel winded. I did this after I did voice lessons, and that was a regret of mine. I wish I did the Levine protocol first, and then I went back to voice. The other thing that I will say about the protocol is that you have to follow it to a T. I was really cocky and I read the instructions and I was like, it's fine, I'm just gonna get on a bike. Absolutely not. You need to read the instructions, you need to understand how the heart rate intervals differ, and then you need to follow it to the T. That means if you miss certain exercises, you don't just keep going through the week, you go back and you redo the week. The moment that I started committing to following it extensively, it made all the difference. Come back for